Welcome back. For the next part of our agenda, we move into the panel discussion. Please do submit questions through the QBI platform. I would like to introduce Professor Joe Howe from Chester University, who will be chairing our panel session today.
Welcome, colleagues, to the panel discussion. Joining me today on the panel are a number of eminent individuals from industry, from academia, etc. First of all, we have Ian Ellerington. Ian, he's head of the Faraday Institution for technology transfer at that particular organisation. Alice Porter. Alice is going to make a fabulous contribution in terms of the UKRI commercialisation activities, because she's Deputy Director there for commercialisation. Thirdly, Paul Beasley. Paul's head of R&D at a blue chip company at Siemens. Professor Bill David. Bill David is the STFC fellow at the ISIS facility and also works at the Appleton laboratory. Jack Nicholas. Jack's the CEO of QDot, a University of Oxford spin-out company. Elodie Viau is the Director of Technology and Integrated Applications at the European Centre for Space Applications. So I've pulled together a number of different questions for the panelists. And the first one I want to ask is to Ian. Now, Ian, you're head of technology transfer at the Faraday Institution. And for me, at least, the question that I want to ask is, how does the Net Zero Living Laboratory relate to the Faraday Institute? And what do you see as being the key drivers for a Net Zero Living Laboratory facility?
Thanks, Joe. So yes, I'm head of technology transfer at the Faraday Institution. We're trying to drive UK research in batteries and energy storage to develop the next generation of energy storage technologies. As part of technology transfer, my aim is to identify the best research that's available and commercialise that in the best way that we possibly can. We need to set up an environment where innovators and entrepreneurs can prosper and deliver economic and societal impact as far as possible. In doing that, we're really coming up with commercialisation plans for all our bits of research. We're helping to identify entrepreneurial researchers who want to set up spin-out companies and want to really take their technology that they've come up with to the next stage. And we have a number of schemes for doing that. It's great for us to be at the Harwell site and have access to the zero carbon living laboratory initiative and facilities. Of course, it means is that the innovators that we're working with have somewhere to test out their technologies in a more benign environment as they go through towards commercialisation. What that means is that our entrepreneurial fellows or our researchers, as they're developing those technologies, can find a safe place to work with to really establish the markets and prove them. And in doing that, we're working with the EU on a programme called the STEPS programme, which is an opportunity for innovators in energy storage across northwestern Europe to test out their technologies. So right now we've got a competition open looking for small and medium enterprises from across the whole of northwest Europe to implement their technologies on testbed sites. And it's great that we're partnering with Harwell to use the Harwell facilities as a testbed so that innovators can bring their technologies to us to demonstrate them in a real environment.
Alice, the second question I wanted to bring to you. I've really been following very closely the development of the UKRI's environmental sustainability agenda over the last couple of years. And I'm left wondering the extent to which the Net Zero Living Laboratory is in a position to support commercialisation. Indeed, how should it be supporting research and development through to commercialisation?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think the Living Laboratory really does offer a fantastic opportunity to support the creation of impact from research. So by enabling support those research outcomes, we can help development through those technology readiness levels, through the commercial development of propositions to really help accelerate taking those applications to the marketplace. And I think by supporting that process of commercialization, you know, ultimately we generate those innovations that are going to create those wider societal impacts in the future. So I think with regards to UKRI's environmental strategy, I think the Living Lab really just offers that opportunity for a truly integrated approach. So that's not only about our own organisation and how we undertake our activities, the collaboration across the research councils and the opportunities for cross-disciplinary working, but also how we catalyse and support the research and innovation that is going to generate those technologies that are going to help us achieve those net zero targets in the future.
Thanks, Alice. I'm just going to come back to you though on one or two issues there. You know, you're Deputy Director of Commercialisation for UKRI. Alice, how do we begin to identify those technologies that will have a far-reaching impact to make a difference upon people's lives?
Absolutely, and I think it's really crucial that we continually horizon scan and really just open ourselves up to the opportunities and the possibilities of how we identify what those emerging technologies, you know, that are going to present real potential for economic impact and wider societal impact and benefits in the future. So I think it's really crucial that we kind of create the circumstances in which those potential applications stemming from the research can effectively flourish and develop. So, you know, the idea of creating a situation in which those ideas can be explored and can be tested and evaluated in a real world environment, such as a living lab, really enables that process of commercialization. I think it not only de-risks those opportunities for investors through demonstration of application, but ultimately it's just going to accelerate, you know, getting those products into society and really making a difference to people's lives.
That's absolutely fabulous, Alice. I'm going to come on to my third question. And the third question, I'm going to direct it at you, Elodie. Elodie, you've got this really superb international background and context. And I guess the question that I want to ask you is, how can we measure the impact of the living laboratory on that international scale, on that international level? And how do we bring through these? And how do we bring through these technologies? What are the breakthrough technologies do you perceive for the future on that international level?
Thank you so much for this question. So yes, at the Harwell campus, we are in a multidisciplinary and multicultural environment with more than 6,000 employees over more than 150 companies. It's a living lab indeed to develop there, to be a showroom of what can be done, and then to bridge it through the European Space Agency. We are bridging to Europe and then soon to international. So at Harwell, there is already mature companies, SME and startup, with a very diverse backgrounds of culture and domain of expertise. That's where people get together, and we believe that competition is a driver and collaboration is an enabler at the European Space Agency. And it's exactly what is happening locally at Harwell for this living lab, having it as a showroom, showing how you can go to a zero carbon environment using the right energy and deploying the right technology, then being this showroom locally, then to be connected through technology like 5G to other places internationally, and being able to then be replicating this showroom developed locally to other campus, and then connecting with various clusters. So the beauty also of Harwell Living Lab is that it's next door to other clusters like the space cluster, the health cluster, and then it's crossing barrier towards the various domain and various environments. So I think that's how it is growing. So an example of what we are deploying at Harwell is this autonomous driving cars that will use autonomous vehicles that will be fully electrical. So that's one example of how we can deploy, test, validate with SME, startup and mature companies on a local basis. And that will be a showroom really that will have an international and global reach. So that's typically what is cool about it.
Thanks very much for that, Elodie. That's a fabulous sort of summary in terms of how we can potentially begin to internationalize some of these technologies and how we can begin to measure some of these particular technologies. So the fourth question I was thinking about as we've been going through today, really I want to target this at both Paul and Jack. We've got a head of R&D at a blue chip company at Siemens, and we've got a CEO of an SME company. And maybe I'll kick off with Paul. And Paul, you know, what technical and regulatory and commercially challenges do you feel exist at the moment? And how do we overcome them in terms of expediting net zero technology development through to commercial deployment? And I'll ask the same question of Jack.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I think the issues here really are around kind of bringing in kind of new technologies and evaluating kind of those technologies in a real environment. So currently regulation obviously kind of restricts some of those activities. I think certainly from the technology perspective, we're working very closely with a number of our customers. You can test the technology, but the regulations actually stop us or hinder us really trying to evaluate the business case. You know, actually having an environment where you can test the engagement of our customers with the technology is also an important kind of factor in this. But really companies will accelerate and develop that technology if they can see a positive business case. But in order to do that, you need to break some of those regulations in order to try some of these new activities. So that's really it from our side. And I think that certainly the Living Lab offers a great opportunity here, maybe to do this a little offline. But kind of certainly it's something that we started to take on board and work with other kind of campuses in order to trial these technologies.
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to come back to you on this because we may well have colleagues in the audience that want to ask questions from government bodies and from the civil service. To what extent perhaps could the regulatory environment actually be an enabling sort of regime in terms of bringing through to commercial deployment rather than a constraining regime, which is what I sense came across in your answer?
Yeah, well, I think the issue at this moment in time is, of course, we're developing new opportunities, and I think in order to proactively change those regulations, you need to have an idea of what what's coming along. So it's all about kind of talking, engaging with them, and maybe explaining opportunities in order to actually do that. I think certainly the current environment is a restriction. I think certainly through collaboration and engaging kind of all of these bodies and kind of bringing them together, we can work to establish a framework that can open up and accelerate some of the technologies.
Thanks, Paul. Over to you, Jack, CEO of QDot, a rapidly emerging SME in this particular space. What do you see as being the technological, regulatory and commercial challenges that you're facing within an SME?
So thanks, Joe. So I think from a commercial perspective, I mean, for a small company, kind of the biggest problems we generally face are trying to get some engagement with potential partners or end kind of user customers. So being on the Harwell site in particular, so we were successful in a bid to something called the Harwell Proof of Concept Grant. That has allowed us to kind of develop a key strategic relationship with a battery cell manufacturer. So the technology we're developing is to enable rapid charging of electric vehicles. Key to that really is the cells themselves. So having that strong relationship and being able to build that through the Harwell Proof of Concept has been very useful to us. Going back to your question on regulatory aspects, I guess for us, for a small company, changes in regulations are potentially an opportunity. We're smaller, more nimble. We can probably adapt to changes in regulatory things much faster than larger companies. So for us, the kind of big change and looks like there's going to be quite a big investment in net zero from the government. That's quite exciting for us, and we feel as though we've joined the bandwagon at the right time in terms of what the technology we're developing. So we're quite excited about that in terms of regulatory changes. In terms of also being on the Harwell site, so I thought I'd touch upon this as well. So it's quite important for small companies. We obviously don't have a lot of capital. We're very resource constrained. So being on the Harwell site, we've also got access to a lot of advanced scientific equipment that you can use on a kind of ad hoc basis. Is very, very beneficial for developing technologies, and one that we've taken advantage of to accelerate the development of our technology.
Thanks for that, Jack. Colleagues, lots of interesting issues coming up here. I hope you're popping those questions into the chat, because I'm just about to come on to my final question, and this is to Bill David. Bill, you're a world-leading scientist. You're a fellow of the Royal Society. You've got the ultimate academic and social capital here. From your experience over the last few years, what would be your advice in terms of ensuring that the Living Lab continues to develop and become a world leader in terms of design and development of net zero technologies?
Right, well, I'm in the very fortunate position, as you say, of being involved in academia, also based at the Rutherford Appleton Laboratory at Harwell, and working quite closely with a number of industries. And I think that the campuses that we have at Harwell and Daresbury and at Edinburgh are amongst the biggest of the UKRI campuses, and they're not just a national asset; they're a resource, and I think hopefully they can be a national treasure, because what we can do is go all the way from the very basic science, the sort of thing that Jack touched on, and he needs to get an answer with kit that he doesn't have, through to the living laboratory, where we're integrating all the different aspects, for example, of the 10-point plan. It's not just taking one of the ideas, but being able to look at all of them together. And the fact that we've got these fantastic world-leading facilities like ISIS and Diamond, and this potential living laboratory where we're looking at the latest pre-commercialization ideas, that's all based on the one campus. It's, I think, a huge advantage. And as Jack was saying, being able to foster the SMEs, but also to involve the big companies like Siemens is a wonderful thing to be able to do, and it's a unique resource. And I think that I'm just excited about the future in terms of what we can do. My bag is energy storage, and I'd love to see the integration of batteries with the zero carbon fuels of ammonia and hydrogen that I'm working on. And I know that there's the opportunity to do that at Harwell, of integrating heat and power at the megawatt level, actually, and demonstrate at that level is a fantastic opportunity. And all our colleagues around this virtual table together, actually, I think together we express the breadth of who's interested and the opportunities that we have. So I'm just excited about the future.
Thanks, Bill. Colleagues, expediting net zero technologies through the technology readiness levels, from our R&D through to commercial deployments, delivering the net zero innovation agenda, driving and aligning to the green industrial revolution, supporting the levelling up agenda. That's all come across very powerfully this afternoon in our discussion. So now it's over to you to ask questions. So looking forward to these questions, colleagues, coming in. The first one I've got here is from Chris Dunkley, and the question is, within the excellent living lab concept, what provision will there be in terms of supporting scale up for manufacturing? What support will there be in terms of scale up for manufacturing? So Paul, I'm going to bring you in on that one in terms of scale up for manufacturing from Siemens. Paul?
Well, I can't really comment on what's going to be on the Harwell campus, but certainly kind of for Siemens, we're obviously want to utilise the living lab in order to demonstrate the integration of technologies. So I think really that's certainly an opportunity to bring together the system of systems, as many of the other speakers have spoken about. How that's kind of taken kind of back to the kind of the companies involved in that, really it's down to them.
Thanks, Paul. Next question coming in about scaling up. It's more to do with capacity and the skills side. So, Bill, I'm going to bring you in on the skills side as an academic and someone very much involved with STFC. And the question here is, what do you think we need to develop the UK workforce to deliver the net zero skills ambition?
Well, as an academic, I'm probably the least qualified to be able to say that, coming from an ivory tower. But one of the things I want to pick up is in what Martin Aston said earlier on. Actually, there is, a real need to engineer ourselves through, actually, and science underpins all that we do and can inform how we go forwards. But it really is building up this engineering base of expertise that we can actually make these things happen. And it's finding partnerships between universities, living laboratories, SMEs, and the blue chip companies. And again, I think that, we see all these people, on the Harwell campus, at the facilities. We see a huge number of people moving through, and it's getting that conversation, working with people as well, actually. And it's securing the funds to be able to move forwards, both in terms of public and private partnerships. And so it's getting, the real force of government behind what we're doing to really make this happen.
Okay, I'm going to throw the same question at Jack as an SME CEO. The skills piece, Jack. What do we need to do to develop the skills piece for the people that you're looking to employ as you build your company?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. It's one we struggle with ourselves, really, is sourcing people, especially in the area that we work, which is in kind of electric powertrains. It's obviously quite a hot area at the moment. There's a lot of demand for people, and there's not enough around. So there's definitely a need to train those people. How we go about doing that, I think from our perspective, if we could have some support that would encourage us to take on things like apprentices, maybe. I know that obviously exists for kind of big OEMs like Siemens, but for us, it's not as simple to do something like that. So we're kind of ready and willing to take on people and try and train them up. But I guess it's that kind of how we do that through government in some way, really.
Thanks, Jack. I think there's lots of opportunities out there in terms of skills. Certainly the government through the Department for Education, looking at the post-16 education reform agenda right now. The issues of skills levy and apprenticeships are high on the agenda as well. So I think there's a real focus in terms of the government, the Department for Education around the opportunities afforded by the green recovery in relation to skills. So I think all of us would be really excited about that, the whole skills piece and building the supply chain to deliver on net zero. The next questions come in from Professor Anonymous, and Professor Anonymous asks, what one piece of regulation would each of the panelists like to see passed? So what regulation would we like to see passed? So Paul, you talked about regulation before, so I'm going to bring you in first of all on this. What one piece of regulation would you like to see changed or passed?
Well, I mean, kind of for us, really, I think the opportunity here is to try to accelerate some of the technologies and the services, kind of bringing together different aspects. So not just the electrical system, but kind of data in order to optimize that. So it's gaining access to all of those elements of data, being able to kind of utilize them, bring them together to optimize the system. And there are kind of various kind of regulations around kind of data access in order to actually do that kind of sharing of data. But then the ability to actually to try to do that, of course, regulation is there in order to protect the end consumer. But unless we actually identify business case and business opportunities, then there's really it doesn't really kind of strengthen the levels of investment in order to try to do that. So yeah, we need to try and find a system whereby we can obviously bring all of these elements together to demonstrate the systems, but doesn't obviously impact in a severe way the end user customer.
Thanks, Paul. Over to you, Ian, on this particular issue in terms of what piece of regulation would you like to see change, amended, passed to enable you at the Faraday Institute accelerate things, etc.?
Well, I'm not the world's biggest fan of regulation or taxes. But for the net zero agenda, clearly some sort of carbon tax would really drive forward some of the innovations that we see. And for batteries and getting a battery industry, then the bringing forward the winding down of combustion engines in vehicles would clearly be advantageous to getting investments into batteries and electric vehicles.
Great, Ian. And I'm going to bring Alice in on this as well from a UKRI perspective. The whole impact agenda, clearly, what piece of legislation do you think needs to be enabled or changed to speed through, accelerate, expedite some of these technologies for some of the fabulous funding that UKRI are putting out into this to commercial deployment?
Yeah, I mean, I think we really have to think about the kind of practical sort of implementation and adoption of technology. And I think one of the things that really kind of comes to mind for me, and kind of linking back to you know, electric vehicles and so forth, is actually the restrictions around our current planning regulations. You know, how are we actually going to integrate this infrastructure into our built environment? So I would certainly like to see things that would really expedite actually how we get electric charging points into our streets that are accessible for all, not just people that perhaps have you know, private driveways and a space to be able to charge their vehicles off the street. Thanks,
Alice. Elodie, a question is coming for you, actually, specifically just for you. Look, and it's a great question. How can the ESA support the re-engineering of engineering to expedite technologies?
Yes, that's a great question, and that's true that we are trying to support these activities within the European Space Agency, because as I was mentioning earlier on, we are trying to build those hubs where we get the engineering and system of engineering together to actually facilitate from the end-to-end the demonstration and the trial of new application. So we were just talking about autonomous car, and there is it's not only the space, but it's also space plus energy plus engineering systems that gets together. And also we need also the skill of the business to make something sustainable and profitable and for long term. So that's really all the fields that are getting together. And so we have this way of looking at engineering at various angles and on a step-by-step approach. Like that, you can innovate in a constant manner, but not wait the full innovation to be ready, but really include some agile methodology like the IT has been doing in the past. So taking those technique in other engineering field and applying it here in the energy domain to achieve the zero net targets. That's what we try to produce at ESA, and with the like really in collaboration with all the industry and university.
Thanks, Elodie. I've got a question come in here which will be of real interest to, or the answer to which will be of real interest, particularly I think to the SMEs, but maybe to other businesses as well. And I'm going to throw it both Alice and Paul. It's from Nick Rimmer, and it goes, what are the most effective business support mechanisms? ... Cash grants, tax breaks, access to facilities, mentoring, access to academics, etc. So over to you, Alice, from a UKRI perspective in terms of commercialisation.
I think I kind of have to say probably all of those things in sort of one mix or another. And I think the important thing here is about really making sure that we have a kind of continuum of both funding and support available to really help you know, these ideas and proposition kind of through their commercial commercialization and development. So I think it's about having the right balance, the right suite of support available, and really just recognizing as well that you know, commercialization is not a simple kind of linear one approach kind of pathway. So we need to recognize the different types of interventions and support that these propositions are going to need.
Thanks, Alice. I am going to take this question over to Paul and bring in Jack as well, so that we've got almost opposite ends from the SME right the way through to the blue chip on this particular company. So access to support, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I think the other, I think all of the above, as Alice mentioned, you know, are of interest. I think the only thing I'd add in there as well is opportunities for collaboration, kind of bringing people together. That's universities, companies, SMEs. you know, this is now bringing together a very diverse kind of groups of technologies. Within Siemens, obviously we have a quite a diverse portfolio, but again, there are elements where we're kind of collaborating with universities, with many of our customers in order to actually deliver some of these solutions. And I think it will need that, and certainly, you know, the Living Lab gives the opportunity in order for those sort of collaborations in order to happen and to spark and generate other new solutions and new ideas.
Thanks, Paul. Jack, extending that question, so what's made you spark, and what's made QDot spark, and how has it happened for you at Harwell?
Yeah, so just going back to what Paul was saying there, I think I'd double down on what he was saying about the kind of the complexity of systems we're looking at these days. So it's very difficult to solve a whole problem in isolation. And we find that ourselves, that you start trying to solve one bit of a problem and realise it has a knock-on impact on another part of the system. And so then you have to start building partnerships to deal with those parts. So I think, yeah, so for us, the big advantage from that point of view, being on the Harwell site, is the access to a lot of other SMEs on site, some OEMs as well. And then also from a resource perspective, we're obviously very cash strapped as usual as an SME. So things like facilities that we can access that would just be too capitally intensive for us to purchase ourselves is also a very useful thing. And then touching upon the Living Lab idea, I think from our point of view, one of the most difficult steps is, okay, you prove it at a prototype level, you prove your technology at a prototype level. How do you then take that to kind of an end user? And it's that step, and I think particularly in the Living Laboratory, if there's an opportunity to do real life validation of a product before you then maybe have to kind of give it to an end user or take it to an end user, would be hugely valuable from our point of view.
Great, Jack. Thank you. Next question is one that's very close to my heart and something I'm very passionate about, colleagues, and that's skills. It's fabulous doing all of this energy technology development, but we need the skills in place in the UK to make sure that we maximise the economic impact, that we have the supply chains in place to deliver. But for Paul and others on the call in the big businesses and in the primaries, and to align the supply chains into this. So, Bill, I'm going to ask you the question as the academic on the panel. From an academic perspective, are new courses aimed at energy transition being explored at the Institute to meet the skills challenge? So that's you, Bill, and then I'll also bring in Ian on that.
Two things I'd say there. Actually, one is that really, having theoretical courses that teaches you about the challenges that you got. That's one thing. Actually, having a living laboratory where people could come in and twiddle the knobs and and see how the energy system is balanced. That's the important thing to be able to do, is to bring people in to have the opportunity to be able to use these facilities. And then, speaking as somebody who's worked on large facilities all my career, I mean, we do a huge amount of training to bring people up to be, experts in neutron scattering, in X-ray diffraction. We need to do the same thing with these facilities. And so a theoretical course is one thing, but getting people to actually do the job, to be able to work alongside Jack, maybe be the, not an apprentice, but somebody who comes along and gets an idea of how an SME works, or works with Paul in terms of these big companies. I think it's important to be able to do these things. The other thing in terms of education is bringing the public along with us, actually, and having them involved, and having outreach to the public, and inspiring them about the opportunities that there are there, and bringing people in and seeing that we have the small companies, the big companies, and UK is open for this transition, and there's huge opportunities as well. So I think the public's very important as well to bring along in all this education.
Ian?
Yeah, skills is a fundamentally important part of the change process that the country is going through. Really, it's a revolution in energy and technologies, which at all levels needs different skill bases. So as part of the Faraday Institution programme in the battery research, we've kicked off at kind of the research level, and we're running PhD programs that are broader than a typical PhD program. So we're including elements of a mini MBA in there to help people think about the business context of what they're working on, as well as giving them the insights into to deep battery technology and research. But we're also working on postgraduate courses. We're working with Warwick Manufacturing Group, who already deliver an amazing introduction to batteries. We're also working with the Advanced Propulsion Centre on both postgraduate and school level training and the sorts of skills that are going to be needed really right across the economy, and everything from basically car repairing to the emergency services. We've got people investigating the safety of batteries, training people on battery safety. We've already got academics from Newcastle University who are having to train the first responders and the emergency services. So yeah, it's a big program, and as we're identifying the gaps in skills, we're trying to put in place programs to fill it as part of the Faraday Institution core activity.
Thanks, Ian. Question for you again, Paul, coming from Hugh Sullivan, and the question goes, what do you need as a blue chip company to make your business case to invest in a capital facility to build long-term GDP growth to manufacture some of these technologies?
Well, in simple terms, obviously, the size of the market, return on investment, the usual sort of things there. I think certainly, as we mentioned, this is kind of mashing together lots of new technologies, new services. It's not the case of solutions in the past where you just bring a box, replace one box with another box. Here, there are opportunities to deliver, new solutions, new services. So certainly being able to de-risk kind of those and evaluate whether the technology is something that our customers will accept. It's not that box anymore. This is something that's new. It's no one's seen it before in many cases. So again, it's trying to reduce those levels of risk, but at the end of the day, it's down to return on investment and the size of the market.
Thanks, Paul. I'm sure that'll be helpful to many people that are in the audience today. I'm sure there'll be a lot of interest in that. Question here, I think it's going to go to Bill. It's about the Harwell cluster. You love this question, colleagues. The Harwell cluster is clearly world-class in terms of physics and engineering, but how does the living lab plan involve experts from other disciplines to build the transdisciplinary teams that will ensure its innovations really deliver the positive impacts needed to mitigate and adapt to the impact of climate change? Bill.
Right. So yes, there's a lot of physics and engineering, certainly, at the Rutherford Appleton Laboratory. But if you look at the Harwell campus, it's not just EnergyTec. We've got space. We've got the health cluster. We've got Public Health England there on site already, so that Ricardo on site actually handling the environmental side of things. So there's much more breadth on the Harwell campus than just energy and just physics and engineering. But yes, there's probably a balance towards the physics and engineering, and absolutely we need to be looking at the biological and the social science side of things as well. That's something that needs to grow, definitely.
And I'm going to bring Elodie in on this question as well in relation to the impact upon your work, and how do you think this transdisciplinary research that goes on at Harwell and transdisciplinary working has supported you in your business to potentially position yourselves in relation to the challenges of climate change, etc.?
Yes, so that's thanks for coming back to me. That's very close to my heart as well. This transdisciplinary and all the cluster working together in Harwell. So that's the beauty to be like on the campus, close to each other. You can go bang on next door and discover something's going on, and then it's clicking ideas, because the solutions are coming from people getting together and fostering those new ideas. Because we are opening a road where you have plenty of new things to invent and create. And we are just at the edge of this transition. And now people have the conscious of the importance of going towards a net zero target, and to really, and getting together to bring those applications, those new services. So having, for example, being on the telecommunication and the space domain, you wonder like, why I'm here? Well, it's because space is like energy, right? We need to have the infrastructure, we need to have to connect things, And in fact, we are very close, and we will empower them to be able to monitor how they spend this energy, how they do. And so that's where we are actually very close field next to each other that can bring new solution if we work together. And that's why it's very important for me and for the European Space Agency to be here today with you, because we want to show that we will bring a solution together with the energy domain. So we should not think about silo of, we should think about clusters that are getting together to find solution.
Great, Elodie. Next question that's coming is from Matt Thomas, and it's a fabulous question. It's about supply chains. So I'm going to bring in Paul again, and I'm going to bring in Jack again, at perhaps slightly different ends of the supply chain in many respects. Can you give any advice on how manufacturing supply chains contributing to the UK net zero energy capabilities ensure that their own operations have a low carbon footprint, or as low a carbon footprint as possible? What do you think is the current best sort of in class at this? Paul?
Well, I think we stole a little bit of a march. I think 2014, we as a company kind of globally decided to drive towards net zero, and we have a target of doing that by 2030. I think we're kind of well ahead of our strategic plans, and there are some discussions about potentially bringing that forward to 2020. So certainly that involves many of our kind of bringing many of our supply chain and our customers and you know, to the same sort of level in order to achieve that. So certainly obviously deploying those technologies to ourselves and demonstrating that these things can be achieved hopefully will encourage and develop those supply chains, other customers, in order to deliver that. And so we're working with a number of other campuses, you know, to bring along the skills and everything that's required as well, not just for Siemens, but you know, we have to look at the wider supply chain as well, and kind of pushing those skills kind of back down to suppliers, SMEs, in order to achieve this. So yeah, it's a good target. I think so we're well on the way to actually achieving that, and certainly bringing many of our supply chain and customers to the party as well.
Fabulous, Paul. Jack, Paul's pushing it out to the SMEs to do this. How are you doing it in terms of your low carbon footprint? Jack? You're on mute, Jack.
Someone was going to do that at some point, so I'll stay on for the team now. Yeah, so it's a difficult one for an SME, because there's a bit of a tension there between kind of getting a product out in a timely manner, and I guess making sure everything you source in building your product is hopefully net zero or is low carbon impact. In terms of impacts of what we're doing, I guess the biggest impact is on probably design considerations and choices of things like materials and manufacturing processes that we use to make our products. It's a bit of a different ballgame, I guess, from what Paul's doing in terms of the scale. So we haven't got a big infrastructure of a supply chain that we're working with. We're trying to establish a supply chain as we develop our products. So we're just trying to be conscious as we do that, and making sure, yes, that we're making the good decisions early on so that we can be net zero when we get the final products completed.
Many thanks, Jack. Next question. I'm going to bring in, I think, looking at the panel, Alice and Bill to this one. And I've got an amazing postdoc from the School of Chemistry at the University of Edinburgh that's developed this novel solar cooker using high temperature phase change materials. And they want to know how they can find an opportunity at our Harwell's Living Laboratory. Is it through the UKRI, for instance, or are there other schemes as well? Alice?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there would be opportunities to explore that through UKRI, and certainly our Future Leaders Fellowship funding would be a really great opportunity to explore that. And that kind of really brings together the kind of innovative exploration around the kind of academic opportunity, and linking that in with a business that might be able to help you explore and progress your ideas. So would absolutely welcome an application to FLF to be able to explore that one.
I guess I could probably jump in there as well. So from our perspective, so we got some initial investment from something called the UK Innovation and Science Seed Fund. And that funding is actually tied to campuses like Harwell. So that would also potentially be another avenue that they could explore in terms of trying to get their idea off the ground.
Yeah, if I can pop in as well, I see that you know, I'm aware of this phase change technology and of SunUp, which is actually a spin out that's involving the University of Edinburgh. And the whole, we talk a lot about energy, but the heat is really important as well. What I think you know, Harwell can offer is up at the megawatt scale, actually, to take these things beyond perhaps what you might have as a laboratory demonstration in the university, and take it up to that next level. And so you know, there's opportunities, you know, and I think you know, this work has been substantially funded by Innovate as well, actually, and it's doing that in a connected way across UKRI. And seeing, you know, what can Innovate and EPSRC and STFC on the Harwell campus do together. And so taking this to the next level, I think that we should be in a place to be able to help this sort of great idea moving forwards.
That's great. Panelists, I think we're reaching the end of our time. Sorry, Ian, I know you want to come in. I know the rest of the panelists want to come as well. But
this is a direct answer to the question. There's a program called Modern Energy Cooking, Loughborough University. Talk to Ed Brown. On behalf of DFID, he's looking at cooking solutions for solar. So just contact Ed at Loughborough.
Thanks, Ian. So it's Ed Brown we have to talk to about cooking in the energy transition, and we want Ed Brown to engage with the Living Lab. At that point, colleagues, thank you ever so much to the panelists and to all the people in the audience that have provided the questions. I believe at this point I'm handing over to Emma.
Thank you to the panel for leaving us with a greater understanding on how we can expedite net zero technologies in the UK, and such a thought-provoking discussion. I'd like to thank the expert panel for their time today, and say a special thank you to Professor Howe for chairing the panel session. I would also like to thank our key speakers and the joint venture marketing and communications teams at the Science Technology Facilities Council, UK Research and Innovation, and Harwell Campus Management, who've worked so hard to stage this virtual conference for us today on behalf of the EnergyTec cluster at Harwell. I would like to mention Fieldhouse Associates for their media support, the QBI team for providing such a fantastic conference platform, plus live streaming on the day with positive momentum. And Steve Makin, our professional videographer, who has done a really wonderful job recording our speakers and panel for the event. The government's Green Industrial Revolution and recently published 10-point plan provides an exciting opportunity for cutting-edge net zero technologies, collaboration and partnerships. We would like to take this opportunity to invite everyone here today to join us in moving the net zero agenda forward. I will be following up with everyone individually, and please do get in touch if you can work with us to develop some of the world-leading solutions. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.